Welcome, comrades, to episode 25. That's right. Now, if you've listened to our last episode, or maybe you just wondered, why is there weirdly an episode out of order on a week when I know there isn't going to be an episode of Red Barrels? But there is an episode of Red Barrels because we switched stuff up. As you may have heard last episode, we're splitting the podcast into the news and our games discussion. The news comes first and the games are now. So this is the games one. Next week it'll be news, and that's the way we're going to go on. I think probably forever, literally forever. The end of time will be still on that process, on that routine. It's never going to end. We're all going to live forever and do this forever. And that's the situation. But so that means that this is going to be the games
Quite
episode.
demanding.
This is the games one.
We're really setting ourselves up for a fall.
And
Next episode, we're sorry to report that all three of the co-hosts have died in a horrible lorry accident.
They were not immortal, in fact. They were merely mortal.
well, whatever. As far as I can tell, all three of us are alive. So my theory stands for now. We're all immortal. And speaking of immortal people, who are they? I'm Alex. But who else is with me?
Sofie. I'm Sofie. I also go by So Freely. Online, where some of you may know me. And also, we are joined by...
It's me, Ed.
Hello, Ed.
Hi. It's great to be back for this first of the gaming split episode. You know, I'm very excited to be trying out this new format, brilliantly engineered, as we explained last time by Alex.
I was so erudite, and everyone was impressed with it.
God, it's good to be here.
You guys are really good at this.
Yeah,
I can't
you
really
blew
keep
our
the
socks
timeline
off.
straight. I'm struggling.
Oh, we're not putting these out of order. Everything is as it
You
appears
just
to
got
be.
to remember,
Right.
Sophie, what Alex
Yeah,
said
just
in the last
remember.
episode, and that clarifies the whole
Okay,
thing.
yes, right. I remember when you said that last episode.
Yes. Congratulations,
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
Congratulations, everyone. But we may as well get straight into it. We're on to the games, and we're going to be talking about games. And coming up later on in this episode, it's what you've all been waiting for. It's only CLOBBERGEDDON. That's right. The Clair Obscur Expedition 33 Spoilercast. Ed and Sophie have played it. If you remember, and you bloody well better, I played it and had incredible thoughts on it. We've all played it, we've all finished it, and we're all going to get into what we thought about it and what we thought about the ending and everything else in between the beginning and the ending of that game, aka the game.
Hereafter referred to as clobbers. I
Clobbers,
think.
yes, clobbers. That's what the only thing
Affectionately.
we're going to call it. It's clobbers. Write that down.
We'll finally be answering the age-old question: will clobs
Clobbs
flop or
Is
plop or
clobs
whatever the
tops or
phrase?
plobs?
Plop,
That's
plops or
it.
plops?
It's
Yeah.
clobbs, tops or plobs.
Yeah.
We'll find out.
It's
But before that, because look, we got to save that for the grand finale. Before that, there is one other game to talk about, and that's my one, and that's Battlefield 6.
Woo,
That's right. Yes, Battlefield's here. It's
Ooh.
back.
shooty.
Everyone loves a military shooter. God knows I do. I'm the biggest fan. And that's not really true. I'm not really the biggest fan, but they're okay sometimes.
I don't know.
They're
I
okay
don't know you well
sometimes.
enough to know that. So
That's true. Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing to be sarcastic about it because I've liked some of the military shooters. You know, some of the earlier Call of Duties were pretty good. As you may recall from the very first episode of the Red Barrels podcast, I talked about the old Call of Duty Black Ops, I think 6, wasn't it? It was 6 and Cold War. No, was it Cold War? I can't even
was.
remember, but I think it was just Black Ops 6. I think 6,
It was just
the one
6.
before 6 was Cold War, I think. But yes, actually, this definitely wasn't Cold War because it was all the end of the Cold War because it was the Iraq War and stuff, from what I remember. Anyway, the Gulf War, I should say. Anyway, we're not talking about that game because Call of Duty has been defeated. Battlefield 6 was the biggest game last year, the biggest selling game in America last year. In fact, I mean, kind of shockingly, Call of Duty was pushed down to the 5th best-selling game in America last year, below Battlefield 6, number 1, NBA 2K26, number 2, Borderlands 4 beat Call of Duty, and number 3,
I'm
and
really
even
shocked by that.
and
Actually.
even
yeah.
Monster Hunter Wilds beat
Me
Call
too.
of Duty
Wow.
at number 4. Now,
To be fair, even I bought Monster
did
Hunter
you?
Wilds.
Oh, yes,
so.
you did.
I
think did we talk about it? I can't
Yeah,
remember.
we talked about it.
Who knows? Who knows?
I did, yeah.
Only
I talked about
Eddie. Oh, yes, of course, we did. Yeah.
imperialism.
In episode 6 of the podcast.
Oh, there you
Come on.
go.
Come on, Alex.
If you're interested.
Of course, Ed is our record keeper.
Yeah, and frankly, I'm pretty upset that you remembered offhand what you did in the first episode and didn't have to refer to my notes, but that's
sorry.
okay,
I'm
Alex.
sorry.
We'll let it slide.
I'm sorry.
Forget next time.
My broken mind is capable of a small amount of memory. Sorry about that.
Just don't let it happen again.
So yeah, Call of Duty has had a big fall from grace. I should say, to be fair, the Call of Duty is also on Game Pass. So a lot of people who have Game Pass didn't buy it, but probably might have bought it anyway. So it's not entirely fair, but I think it's still, even though it was Game Pass last year, I think it still was the best-selling game last year. And now it's doing very badly.
It was in the United States, yeah.
I have
just
not
checked.
played Call of Duty this year because it's on BDS, and we recommend you don't. So we haven't talked about it, but it has gone down very badly regardless of BDS. So the reigning king now is Battlefield 6. In fact, they kind of go out of their way to have a screen that comes on when you first play the game that literally says the biggest selling shooter of 2025. Literally on it.
Wow.
They patched the game to boast about it. And I know I've got to give some respect to that. So
if you got it,
for
better
those
flaunt
who
it.
are unaware of Battlefield, it is a long-running series since I think the early 2000s. Originally World War II shooter. It also, just like Call of Duty, moved into more modern stuff. The big kind of difference between Battlefield and Call of Duty is in the multiplayer. The multiplayer in Battlefield has traditionally been these wide-scale open maps that you have to complete various objectives in, usually take points and holding different points as long as you can, that kind of thing. Always been a lot more open-ended. Famously, you can get planes in this one and fly them around. And famously, you can have guys balance on top of the planes and shoot people from on top of the plane. That's the most classic Battlefield thing there is. Personally, I've always been a bit more of a Battlefield guy than Call of Duty guy. I preferred the more open gameplay. I did play, to be honest, this me talking about it is mainly going to be about the single player, which it hasn't always been in Battlefield games, but is in this one. But I have played just a bit of scene setting. I have played a little bit of the multiplayer, and I know it's not really for me. To be honest, maybe if I'd started when the game actually came out. I picked this up in the New Year's sales, a pretty good big discount, so I was pleased with that. But everyone's really good at it now. I'm like literally, rank 2, and everyone's rank 150, and I just get torn apart. Basically, I had a bit of fun. Maybe if I put a lot of time into it, I could enjoy it. But I feel like my multiplayer shooter days are kind of behind me, at least for now. So it seems fine. I'll say that it seems cool. I had a good time with Battlefield Bad Company 2 back in the day. I haven't enjoyed it as much as that, but that was a very long time ago, so I can't really compare them. Yeah, seems all right. That's my view on the multiplayer. But like, what we're really going to get into here, let's be honest, is the single player, because that's got some of that juicy politics in it. That's right.
Ooh,
so
delicious.
The multiplayer in general, it's relatively short. It feels a bit kind of abrupt, the end. Seems like there were probably more intended into it. I'll get into the actual story in a minute, but it does end on a cliffhanger. So the implication would be that they intend to make more of this soon. And considering how well this sold, I would not be surprised if they did that. So, but there are a number of missions. It's fairly standard, kind of Call of Duty, Battlefield kind of military shooter missions. They're fairly linear. There are a few bits where there are kind of wider. There's basically one mission in the game where you have like a wide area to explore, and like 4 or so objectives basically things that you have to blow up on different parts of the map, and you have to make your way there. So that gets a bit open, but other than that, everything is pretty linear. I did enjoy it more. My most recent military shooter was Black Ops 7, or Black Ops 6, sorry, back in that first episode that we were mentioning. And I did enjoy the gameplay a lot more than I did that, because that game really felt, in gameplay terms anyway, very dated. I mean, just like little guys would just pop up and you just shoot them, and it felt like almost like a light gun game from the arcades at times, how basic it was. This is, I mean, it's hardly gonna blow your mind, but it is a little bit more complicated. There is more of focus on like flanking and stuff. Enemies go down a bit slower. It takes a little bit longer to take them out, but there's nothing in it gameplay wise that is particularly earth shattering. There's there's quite a bit of spectacle, which is quite fun. There's a dam that explodes, which I feel like happens like a lot in Battlefield. Dams getting blown up. There was like a whole dam in Battlefield 4, which was the last Battlefield game I played, which was like kind of a launch or launch-ish game for the PlayStation 4, from what I remember. I know there was a dam, and there was certainly a dam multiplayer level, and I think there was one in the single player as well. So I know what's up with the dams. But there's like a whole section where New York, somewhat implausibly, gets invaded by these enemy forces, and you have to fight them on the streets of Brooklyn. That's pretty fun. There's one of the pretty much the earliest set piece is you have to do a kind of a D-Day style, like landing on the Rock of Gibraltar. So that's one for the weirdo UK. There's a certain weirdo kind of military guy who's obsessed with Gibraltar in the UK, I feel like. And this is like living out your fantasies. There's a fun bit where you go through like a little World War II museum while you're playing the military shooter, which is a fun little thing. And, you know, as you go through, you have these squad members with you the whole time. They're called Dagger Squad. And you play as different members of them across the game. And one's just like a sniper, and they basically try to emulate the specific roles that you have in the multiplayer. So in the multiplayer, there's assault, which is just a guy with assault rifle, and there's a sniper, there's an engineer who can fix vehicles, and then there's support who can like do medical stuff. They sort of like, I think each one of the 4 members of your squad are one of those guys, and you play as each of them, and there's like a little bit of each of those in missions, but I mean, you could barely even notice that, except maybe the sniper. The rest of them have basically identical guns, and you don't have any real cause to be fixing vehicles or anything. And so the rest of it pretty much blends into each other. When I played the multiplayer after I finished the single player, and I was disappointed there wasn't more of an attempt to kind of train you up in how the multiplayer works through the game, because I felt like I was thrown in a deep end, and the whole huge numbers of like weird rules and loadouts and things like that, and exactly what you're supposed to be doing that does not really explain to you at all. It's not really, I didn't really feel like it was built for a first time player. I mean, I'm not the first time, but I haven't played a Battlefield game in a very long time. But let's get into the politics, because they are kind of weird. So this game is set in 2028, so the very near future. And it posits a world in which there is a private military company called Pax Armata, which has just somehow been getting bigger and bigger to the point where it's now starting to rival NATO itself. And some countries are like breaking from NATO and joining up with Pax Armata instead. Though the game goes really far out of its way to never say which countries. Just some of them. Not America. Probably not Britain either. Probably not none of the big countries you've like heard of. But, you know, some of those other countries.
Which is kind of ironic, because America would definitely be the first country to sign up to this.
So yeah, this whole game is a lot about NATO. It's all about NATO, even though all the soldiers you play as are Americans and they've all got American flags on their arms. They are very much, it's seemingly NATO soldiers first, and there's a lot of talk about NATO in this game. So it very much seems like when they first conceived of this game and the plot, that it was in the wake of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, at which point a lot of libs got really, really up about NATO. NATO being super cool became the highest priority in their lives. So this game is very much kind of, is NATO great, and wouldn't it be bad if NATO fell apart? Now, the way NATO falls apart in this game probably would be bad. It falls to an evil private military company. I would probably rather NATO than that, I guess. But what can I say? I think we can agree that there may be better alternatives than either of those two options. But so this is like very much NATO. The first mission in the game is you are a team and the army is handing over control to Pax Armata because the country you're in, I forget even which one it is has shifted over to Pax. But then Pax, they attack you. They start blowing shit up, and you are there to protect some sort of cyber weapon, which is basically just a bunch of servers, I guess. And so you blow up the servers so that the Pax can't get them, and then you get out of there. Unfortunately, most of your team die. That's a pity, but don't worry, you get a new team, and they're your main team the rest of the game. Then the rest of the game is basically you fighting against Pax Armata as they slowly start to take over more and more of Europe, and I guess maybe they even try America. And also, there's some levels in Cairo as well. So don't worry, there is some shooting of Arabs in this game. Wouldn't be a military shooter unless you got to shoot some Arabic people.
Great.
There is some of that, but most of it is in like Europe and America. Well, there's a bunch in Tajikistan. I'm not sure they count as Europe. I'd have to check out on that. Yeah, so it's all about NATO and stuff. Eventually, it becomes clear that the cyber weapon, they did actually get their hands on it or something, and this allows Pax to hide all their troop movements from satellites or something, essentially, which leads to the somewhat implausible situation where they invade New York. Specifically, they're trying to assassinate the president, of course, who is there for some sort of, he's done like an emergency NATO session of all the countries of NATO that they don't mention who the countries of NATO currently are, but he's there for them. Anyway, he gets away. We're going to get spoilers, sorry. I know.
Oh no, don't
Not for
spoil this.
Battlefield
Not for Battlefield
6.
6, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No.
I should
Oh,
say that the
well.
whole way we've been playing this game, it's been kind of through the framing of, it's actually all been flashbacks to a later point where the members of Dagger Team have cornered this one woman who's like their CIA handler, and she's like, oh, there's people coming to get her. But over the course of these cutscenes, it becomes clear they're actually quite antagonistic towards her. They don't like her that much. And suffice to say, in the final big set-piece missions, you finally confront the bad guy who runs PAX called Kincaid. He's just some Scottish guy. And he reveals that actually he works for the CIA. Kincaid.
Kincaid.
Yes.
Like K-I-N.
No.
Not King with a
Yeah.
G.
No.
He sounds a bit like a Mario villain.
Kincaid, I think. And he
I
reveals
feel like that. I haven't played enough Metal Gear Solid, but that sounds very Metal Gear Solid.
No. If it was Metal Gear, he'd just be called like Orange Man. And he just like oranges or something. No, actually, Orange Man. That's
Okay,
he's
alright.
Scottish. That sounds like a sectarian thing. All right, let's
Alright,
imagine
I
I thought
clearly
of
have
that.
not
So,
played enough
are you
Metal Gear
saying
Solid.
are you saying that
Oh,
Orange
wow.
Man bad? Hello there.
Anyway, Kincaid, just before he dies, reveals that actually he works for the CIA and CIA created Pax Armata. And then we flash forward back to the flash forward things, and they confront this woman with this, and she also reveals that, oh yes, it's true. However, Pax Armata's gone rogue and they can't control it anymore. But Kincaid's dead, the guy who's running it.
Right.
He's dead. So exactly what the situation is not clear. And your main guy, he receives information in his ear. You don't hear it, but he receives it from a mysterious handler who seems to suggest, like, oh, he's giving him orders. What's he going to do? It looks like he might execute this woman who's the other handler, but like basically is like close up on the end of his gun, and then the screen goes black and you hear a gunshot. But like that gives a lot of room for it not to have actually shot her. And that's the end of the game. That's the cliffhanger. What happens with that?
My God.
Yeah.
People will be clamoring
So
to find out.
It's a pretty thin story, to be honest. It's like a fairly thin excuse for a bunch of missions in exciting locales. I should say, actually, I did mention the shooting Arabs thing. One thing that is quite kind of interesting about this game, and I mean, I feel like they must have done it. They must have done it in one of these military shooters. But I can't remember ever seeing it in the ones I played. But you do play as an Arab guy for a bit in one of the missions. who you're friends with. So I genuinely can't remember that ever happening, but it must have done, right? I mean, it's such obvious thing for them to do a long time ago, but that is something at least. Yeah. So obviously, NATO and feelings about NATO are a large part of this game. Suffice to say, we're recording this. Looks like for now, Trump has backed down from his threat to invade Greenland, which would almost certainly just destroy NATO immediately if he did that. Probably some of the military-industrial complex reminded him that it would be really bad for them if that happened. So it seems like the threat to NATO is probably, in real life, is dormant for now. But that whole escapade really did show up how kind of questionable NATO is as an organization. Basically, a military alliance that exists to serve the United States, which it turns out is very capable of just electing a complete fucking lunatic in charge, which is probably not something that the rest of us should be swearing military fealty to. That would be my position anyway. This game doesn't really get into that. So if I say the president is not Trump, it's some other guy who seems like a fairly stand-up guy from what you see of him, in classic. He's a Latino in the alternate world of Battlefield 6. It feels like a bit of a wish to harken back to Obama there, which they're not getting, it seems. But yeah, there is obviously at the end this kind of sop to the idea that, actually, maybe it's corrupt and the CIA are behind everything. Maybe things are more complicated than you want. There's like the implication, kind of the taste of the fabled American adventurism blowback in the fact that they I should say that the motive for setting up Pax Armata by the CIA that's given is that they wanted to combine all of America's enemies under one flag because America works best when it has a united enemy, I guess. I feel like America's had a pretty good run past few decades of having a good go of having enemies, which they've made a big deal out of, that they don't really need to invent new ones particularly. If they really wanted to, they could go all on I mean, they're trying it with Venezuela and Cuba now. I don't think they really need to confect one. Lots of people don't like America, usually for very good reasons. So the whole kind of this scenario feels a bit weak. It's private military companies are obviously a very real concern in reality, but they've also been kind of a boon to the military shooter in that they just represent a force that they can, completely separate from any kind of real, or at least very clear actual, nationality or ideology. They're just like bad guys, and it's okay to shoot them. They're not, this isn't going to create a situation where they can't sell this game in some country somewhere. So, it's just Pax Armata. They're not real, so it's fine to murder all of them. Don't worry about it. What is interesting, though, is just like the lack of any ideology given on the part of Pax Armata. Like, if this genuinely happened, okay, a rival kind of alliance based around a PMC to NATO, and people are joining up with it, why would they join up? There would surely be some sort of reason for that. There'd be some sort of ideological unity between these countries that joined up. But we never even find out what countries they are. There's you get to talk to Kincaid a couple of times, and he's just like, he's really upset with you, with America, because they betrayed him in some way. Something that is very weird about the plot of this game, is that I spent most of it thinking that it was actually a direct sequel to Battlefield 4, just because it's just constantly referring to things that happened in the past that I don't know about. And I just assumed, because I cannot remember the plot of Battlefield 4, this is all like sequels to this game that came out over a decade ago now. That seems pretty silly that they would so directly reference that without recapping it. But then when I went to just quickly check it out before talking here, I discovered that no, they are completely unrelated. I was reminded of the plot of Battlefield 4, which was the last kind of modern day Battlefield, I should say. And it's completely different. It don't share any characters, nothing to do that. So why Kincaid keeps having a go at me for betraying him, I have no idea. But he's just like getting revenge or something, generally. He just wants to destroy stuff and take over stuff for something. There's no real There's not even the kind of, okay, they're PMC, so is it for profit? No, not really. Kincaid, this guy does not seem to care about profit. It being a PMC is just a vehicle through which you can have an independent entity that has a lot of guns and tanks and shit. That's it, really. It could be a different setup than a PMC, but that's just what they have to go with. It's not really a commentary at all on, private militaries.
It seems like their strategy would be a terrible business strategy for a PMC because surely they're using all their own stuff. Like they're not selling their, doesn't a private military company employ people and then sell those services to?
Well, presumably the people signing up to the
these guys aren't selling their. They're not selling their services.
Presumably, the people signing up to this neo-NATO
like,
would be giving them money in the same way that we give NATO money. I suppose maybe it's an interesting concept of like what is really the difference between NATO and a PMC when you get down to it, and maybe there isn't any, but I don't really think that's what this game is trying to say, if it's trying to say anything, which I think it's really trying not to say anything except NATO, they're cool. Yeah, it's just I mean, we've talked about this before. I mean, let's say Black Ops 6 did a similar thing where they, even though it was set in like the 90s in real life situations, there's the Gulf War in it and stuff like that. It turns out that the real enemy is a completely fictional group that is acting on their own outside of the CIA or the barely still existing USSR or any other group. They're just like completely fictional, so they can avoid any try and avoid any political angle while simultaneously kind of borrowing from the history of the time. This isn't even doing that. It's just trying to like, okay, NATO, when they were making it, they probably thought, well, everyone seems to agree that NATO is good. Everyone in big quotes there, to be clear. So they're safe. We can just talk about NATO. And then just made up an enemy that says nothing. I don't know. I guess it's kind of weird because I'd like it to say something more substantive than that. But at the same time, whatever it was going to say, we weren't going to like it. It's not going to call for the people's
I'm just trying to
revolution or something. It's going to be if these games were ever going to say anything, it was going to be pretty bad.
I was just trying to make it make sense in terms of what the private military company gets out of this arrangement. Like, I get, I could see you could do a story where maybe some rogue state of some kind spent loads of money and invested in hired a private military company, and then they used the might afforded to them by that company to do a big war. Or on the other hand, what's the closest equivalent to like a private company doing kind of an imperialism would be like the East India Company, I guess, like and all the different versions of that. But they didn't make money from the war. The war was what permitted them to then make money. So like, how are they making any money from this? This just seems like a loss-making venture.
It turns out that the CIA created and funded them on purpose, not to make, to further America's interests. So I guess they don't have to make money.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not very coherent.
I guess so. Yeah. You think that they would have to seem at least plausible, though. Like, it's taken like 5 seconds of thinking about it for this entire company to fall apart. But anyway, let's not overanalyze the in-world story.
Well, no, we're here to analyze the in-world story of Battlefield 6. But
this is true.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, as I said, it's a bit thin. I was hoping for more. I was hoping for, especially the idea of like, NATO collapsing. And like, what is it going to be? And it's just like the most anemic form of NATO collapsing you could imagine. And even then, NATO doesn't collapse. They basically beat Pax Armata at the end, though. I think they probably still exist enough for them to have them come back in the next game if they really want to do that. I don't think even. I mean, it's sold so well. I think they'll probably think, well, we have to carry it on, right? But I think almost no one who bought this game was terribly impressed by the story of the game and is like really looking forward to the further adventures of Dagger Company. But yeah. I think that's it for Battlefield 6. If you want to play that military shooter that came out very recently, this one isn't under BDS, although it does look like EA is soon going to be owned by Saudi Arabia. So there's probably no right answer, but this is a slightly better answer than breaking BDS. And frankly, at least as if Call of Duty 6 is any indication, I thought it was better overall. All right. Well, you got through that. I know you were just putting up with me talking about Battlefield because we're here for the main event. It's CLOBBERGEDDON Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Let's go. Who wants to go first? Not me.
I
You've
will
heard me
go
talk about it, but
first. Bravely. I shall bravely go first.
I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed.
Our hero.
I'm just gonna, I guess, recap. I'm just gonna read the sort of like first Wikipedia paragraph about the game to remind
I should say,
our listeners.
sorry, but before you start, this is going to be a full spoiler cast. We're going to get into the ending. We're getting into everything. But first, we're going to Ed and Sophie is going to generally talk about what they thought about it, and then we'll let you know when the shows come down. We'll give you a clear warning
when we're about to talk spoilers. Yeah, but just to sort of give you the background of the game in case you're not familiar. Somehow, even though it's been very popular this last year for good reason. So Clair Obscur Expedition 33, or as I've been affectionately calling it Clobbers, and it feels like everyone else has just sort of adopted saying it.
Everyone else has adopted saying
really
it
cute.
when they're around you. I don't think this has become a general rallying call for the populace.
I've found other people saying Clobbers in other spaces. Or correcting themselves, like the habit.
I call it
clobbers
behind Sophie's back as well. It's not just for Sophie.
Me. It's catchy. What can you say?
Sure, it is very catchy.
It is good.
So Clobbers is
it's your masterpiece.
It's my masterpiece.
Sophie.
It's Clobbers. I'm really chuffed with that. So it's a 2025 role-playing video game developed by French studio Sandful Interactive and published by Kepler Interactive. It's set in a dark fantasy Belle Époque setting. Which is sort of the golden era, I guess, of France. The game follows the volunteers of Expedition 33 as they set out to destroy the Paintress, a being causing the yearly gommage, which erases those at or above an ever-decreasing age. In the game, the player controls a party of characters from a third-person perspective, exploring areas and engaging in combat. Its turn-based mechanics feature real-time aspects such as quick-time events and timed actions in combat. From what I understand, the sort of French creators of the game were heavily inspired by JRPGs and felt like sort of AAA gaming industry had kind of been ignoring like turn-based, like proper turn-based games in the style of JRPGs, like with a proper plot line. So they sort of set out to essentially make like a AAA feeling turn-based game. And I feel like they definitely succeeded. It's received numerous accolades last year, became the most awarded title in the Game Awards history, winning 9 of the record 13 nominations it received at the Game Awards 2025, including the Paramount Game of the Year recognition. So, yeah, it's done super well. I played it on stream, almost all of it on stream. I played a little bit of it offline, but I played almost all of it on stream. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, I'll be honest. I kind of I told my stream this, and I don't feel bad saying it now because I did purchase this game, to be very clear. But at first I did download it. You can fill in from where. I at first procured it because I was very skeptical about the combat, basically. I was really, really skeptical about my ability to enjoy the turn-based mechanics. I have a little bit of experience with playing turn-based games, but I do not like them. I didn't really enjoy the gameplay that much of Baldur's Gate when it first came out. I enjoy it more now. And I've played some Final Fantasies here and there. I played Final Fantasy 8 and 10-2 as a child. But both of those games I got stuck in exactly the same place, multiple replays through it. So I think it's just not good at the strategy. And at some point you hit a wall where it's like, okay, you do actually have to be you do have to know what you're doing. So because clearly I hit the same wall every single time. So I'm not very good at...
What about Pokemon, Sophie? If you ever play Pokemon?
I played Pokemon when I was a kid as well. And I also kind of just would probably get so far, and then I just sort of struggle. I'm just really not good with turn-based games. Same thing with Baldur's Gate. Honestly, I got a bit burned out towards the end. I still haven't finished it entirely. I've finished most of the quests, but I found a lot of the end game combat encounters, even though I played on easy in Baldur's Gate, just really tough. But yeah, so I downloaded it at first, and then I played basically the prologue, which made me cry, and then I immediately bought it. So that was kind of my first impression of the game, and I loved it. I think I loved it despite the turn-based, because I do think the game makes it fun. I think it makes that style of combat really fun. That being said, I still don't like it. I still don't like it very much. I did play most of the game on easy, I think. I played it on easy, and then around halfway through, I switched it to sort of medium difficulty. And then again, towards the end, I switched it back to easy because I just kind of really only cared about the story, the plot, not really much of a strategist or like.
What was the how big was the difference? Like, how did it feel different to play it on easy versus medium?
It felt very different when I first started playing it. It didn't feel very different. Tuning it down, the major difference is that basically you take less damage. That's the major difference. You don't do more damage. So if you haven't sort of like leveled your characters, or if you're not using the right abilities against the right enemies, it's still gonna take a very long time. But the enemies do like much less damage. It would be very difficult for you to die in a fight, I think, on easy.
I think it also makes the parrying and the dodging easier.
Yes, this is true. It makes the windows slightly larger, but not a lot.
Okay.
They are still genuinely a little bit challenging. Like, it's not like it's 100% easy. Like, I still had to get over a learning curve when it came to parrying in the beginning, even on easy mode, because it doesn't spoon feed you the parrying, and that really is how you're supposed to play the game. Is it's really sort of focused on this very closely timed parrying and dodging mechanic, which took a while for me to get used to, and a little bit of frustration for me at the beginning. But then I got into it. Yeah.
When you moved from easy to like medium, did that like fuck up your timing? Like, because you'd got the timing down for easy, and then it
fucked it up a little bit. But I think that's the thing. I think the timing, it's not that generous with the window. You do kind of have to get it more or less right.
No.
When I switched it back at the end of the game, when I switched it back to easy, I could tell that I was making some parries that I absolutely should not have made. But I could tell that like some of them were like, you know, on that threshold, but most of them were fine. But like some of them I'm like, ooh, I don't think I should have gotten that one actually. Yes, it's a little bit more forgiving. I would not say it's like it spoon feeds you though. Again, most of it is down to actually like, getting the parries, and then also nailing the quick time events that happen during combat as well. Like you sort of have to get quick time events in order to execute like a perfect attack. A lot of it kind of relies on that, which I had a slight weird complaint about the fact that if you have, there's an accessibility option to have automatic QuickTime events on, right? As a lot of video games do. But if you do, they're never perfect. They're just fine. They're like average, which I kind of think feels a little bit weird in terms of an accessibility option, where it puts you at a huge disadvantage in a fight. Like, I kind of realized halfway through the game that I was at a massive disadvantage because I thought it was making all of the QuickTime events perfect automatically, but it wasn't. It was making them all like average. So I was doing a lot less damage than I was supposed to be than if I were to just do the QuickTime events manually. So like, absolutely for me, fine. I get that. But it does seem like a bit of an unfair punishment for someone who has to use those accessibility controls. I wasn't really sure about that implementation. I thought that was a little bit weird. But yeah, I think overall I loved this game. I loved the sort of sincerity of it. I think at points I feel like it can be almost sort of verging on melodrama, but I love it because I feel like it's very sincere. I feel like they set out to tell this really quite complex and emotional story, and I love a story that tries to tell, you know, a really complex story just about emotions at the end of the day. I think, you know, we'll sort of get into it more later, but it sort of is this very big plot with big stakes that end up actually sort of reducing quite a bit and being quite small stakes in the end, in terms of like quite close interpersonal stakes, which is I do love it. I do love interpersonal stakes. I love that stuff, so I'm a sucker for it. Yeah, I loved it. I love playing it on stream. Obviously, lots of like fun reveal moments. Like, lots of people tuned in just to see my reaction to specific moments, because there's a few of them that are like quite shocking, quite sort of plot twisty. The music is fantastic. I love the music so much. A lot of the music I think is like genuinely quite listenable outside of the game, like quite recreationally listenable. I would agree that I think some people have been like saying it's one of the best soundtracks in video games history. And I think I am inclined to agree with that. And I thought maybe that would have gone to like Baldur's Gate last year, but this one is like, it is better. I think it's just a phenomenal soundtrack that gets really like, it's very like romantic and French most of the time, and gets really like anime-esque and JRPG towards the end, which feels really appropriate for like the scale the video games turns into, and it sort of aesthetically matches.
There was a few moments where it really reminded me of Doctor Who, actually. Like, I'm a big Doctor Who boy. but like where it has like that kind of melodrama of
Yeah.
like Maury Gold's medium, like early Doctor
Yeah,
Who
that
scores.
checks out.
Really rate that stuff.
Yeah, that checks out. I feel like a lot of it did kind of remind me a little bit of.
I think that's a really mean thing to say about Clair Obscur, since Murray Gold's music is like the worst thing about Doctor Who. Sorry, Ed.
Maury Gold's music is incredible.
It's the worst thing. It's terrible. Anyway,
Didn't you also say the soundtrack of Clair Obscur was also
Well,
fine?
yeah, no, I thought it's very good.
Alex?
I thought I can't really think of any specific theme in it that I can even remember. Like when I'm listening to it at the time, I'm like, "This is really
can
good.
think of
It's
so
good.
many,
This is so
man.
good." And then I'm like afterwards, I'm like, "Hey, remember that song that goes?" There's that one that goes, "Clair Obscur, do 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 do," and that's like kind of the main theme, I guess. I remember that, but other than that, like when I watched quite a lot of Sophie's stream. I recommend. I don't know how much of it is still on archives or whatever, but if you can, you go back and watch it.
Not much.
Not much, but
Yeah.
you don't know
They
much
get
time left.
automatically deleted after a while, yeah.
Yeah.
So get it while you
Um,
still can.
But when I was watching it, I was like reminded, oh yeah, I love this song. This is a really great one. But like I immediately fell out of my head as soon as the stream was off. So that's my only issue with it. I think it's a very good
Okay. All right.
score.
That's
All
fair.
right.
That's
Murray
fair. I
Gold
don't-
is terrible though.
I think as a soundtrack, I think it doesn't need to be catchy. I guess would be my like review, which I don't think you're necessarily saying it has to be catchy. But I would say that like as a soundtrack, I don't think it has to be catchy. If anything, I think it would be more annoying if it were catchy. I did frequently get Monoko's theme stuck in my head because it is incredible. So yeah, but yeah, I guess I don't have like one thing I wanted to say was that I think I didn't re-listen to the previous episode where Alex spoke about it in depth. But I think for some reason I had
Episode
14.
14. Thank you. You want to go back and check it out,
so
listeners?
much, yeah. Well, I think this could be this could be entirely fault of my own, where I had the impression that it was a bit more about climate change than I believe it actually was. I think like it was definitely sort of contributing or like a background theme in terms of like the setting initially. But I think, again, similar to what I said earlier, without explicitly, describing the plot, which we'll get into later, I think the stakes are actually quite a bit smaller. Definitely that as like a background, I think, absolutely. Climate change is like a background or a setting. But I think for some reason I was kind of under the impression that it would be a bigger part of the game than I believe it was in the end. I think that's the thing. I only have positive things to say. I think it was beautifully performed. The performances are all fantastic. I have no complaints about the performances. Right, so I'll just get on to a couple of my critiques and then we'll sort of go on to Ed's portion and then talk about the politics, I suppose. But yeah, I think that my critiques are really only game design focused, to be honest. Well, game design and writing design. My first critique is that the maps are not well designed enough to be navigated without a mini-map. I found that extremely frustrating throughout the game. I was constantly getting lost. And as someone who, like, I don't have a very good working memory, part of that is because I have diagnosed ADHD. I don't have a very good working memory, but it became very difficult for me to navigate the maps. I would constantly forget where I was coming from. But that's also not only on me, it is on the map design. Like, the map design was not great.
It's definitely a problem for people without ADHD as well. I mean, what makes it worse is that the battles take you
Exactly.
Classic,
that's the thing. I know it was a problem.
Turn-based JRPG style. It takes you to like I mean, it's basically the same location, but
like
it's like
landmark.
it's a different area, sort of. And then when you finish the battle, it just takes you right back.
It's very difficult to find your bearings.
You're facing some other direction. You have no idea where you're going. It's really difficult.
Yeah. So maps were stunning, gorgeous, like beautifully rendered, but just not well designed enough in terms of like lots of corners, lots of like multiple pathways. I remember I was like stuck mostly with navigational issues in the like the Sakapatat world for like an hour just because I kept taking wrong turns and retracing my steps accidentally, especially when you every time you save, enemies refresh, like in like Souls games. I found it extremely difficult to tell where I had been because the enemies would be refreshed, so I wasn't, in a lot of games you'd be like, oh, I just go towards where the enemies are. That's usually how you navigate new areas, but it doesn't work for this type of game. So I found that really frustrating. It's not like a major drawback, but I was just like, it would have been extremely much improved by a mini-map. A mini-map with a fog of war, even better. just like, help me. I don't know where I am. And then lastly, I guess, which we could talk about this a bit more in the sort of spoiler section, but I do think the pacing of the story is weird. I think it is a very strangely paced story in terms of like the second act ends on an extremely climactic note, and then you kind of like don't really get much of a ramp up to the next very much more supposed to be climactic note. So it just feels like you spend a lot of the game doing busy work until you get to sort of like the main sort of story elements, and then it like builds very appropriately, I think, in the first act, or the emotions build really appropriately, really powerfully. And then they sort of crescendo in the second act, and then crescendo again in the third act with not as much build up leading up to it. And then there's like a long portion of the game which is spent in the epilogue, essentially. So I do think the pacing of the game is a little bit weird. I think they probably could have worked a little bit on that timing in terms of just writing, how much of the writing we're putting in we're portioning out to each act. I genuinely, when the second act at the sort of end of this, or like throughout the second act, I kept thinking, am I in the third act? Like, have I gone into the third act and I just don't remember seeing the text? And I just feel like that sort of confusion enough was sort of like telling me that the story beats we're feeling a little, and I kind of understand it's because you're kind of coming across a faux climax in order to come across the actual climax. But for an experience as like experiencing the story for a first time perspective is just very weird, and it feels quite like a roller coaster, but not necessarily in a good way. It's like, yeah, going up, taking a really, really big drop, and then there's another big drop. It doesn't even build up to the big drop is just two big drops in a row with like a little bit of flat roller coaster in between. Just a bit oddly paced, I would say. But otherwise, really positive. I'm glad I played it on stream. It took me a while to finish it, but it was a wonderful game to experience, especially with a community as well. It was nice to have people's help and to kind of like bounce the thoughts and emotions and stuff off of each other. But yeah, that's me. Ed, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to get onto the spoiler section before I go into my feelings on the story and the pacing of it too much. But before we do that, just some other little bits to add on to what you were saying. I feel like I don't know, everyone's already said this, but I feel like the voice acting was incredible. It was so everyone
naturalistic.
spoke so softly. It gave it a kind of magic.
Yeah,
kind of, but it felt like they were sort of in my ear in like a really like chill kind of way. And the dialogue itself felt really well written a lot of the time. Like, yes, sometimes it could border on melodramatic, but only in a way which like served what the story was trying to be. I felt like I really enjoyed the variety of the combat. We've talked about that it's the JRPG with sort of, action elements, a bit like Super Mario RPG, but better. but I also like the fact that each character essentially has their own mini game in combat as a result of that. Like, you have to do your own, like a different sequence of things depending on which character you're playing. Like, it really does add quite a lot of depth to it. And I also appreciated in combat all the little wrinkles that certain enemies would bring to it. Like, maybe you'd face an enemy who would get additional shields every turn, which basically force you into playing an incredibly aggressive play style. Or I liked the ones, there were quite a few where there was like little twists, little things you needed to do that the game didn't tell you that you needed to do exactly. Like the lamp master battle, where if you shot the lamps, you have to like learn that you needed to shoot the lamps in the correct order in order to be able to proceed. I guess that's kind of a spoiler, but not for anything major.
Forget about it.
Like things like that. There was a lot of detail and a lot of care put into making the combat constantly feel interesting, and it never really got stale, which I
want to
really
just agree with that
appreciated.
quickly, even though like despite again, if someone had asked me if I could change anything about the game, I would say the combat. I think that's not because it's poorly designed, it's just because it just doesn't gel with me, like, and that's 100% a me issue. I think the combat was so well designed and did feel very fresh throughout. Obviously, that freshness, I think, for me ended up being occasionally frustrating, because I was like, I don't know what to do here. I don't know how to figure out what to do here. But I think, like, yeah, for other players, I think it's just constantly fresh and very innovative, a very innovative way to do that combat system. So I just want to agree and also say that if I say anything bad about the combat, it's 100% me. It's my problem.
Yeah, and all that for me, I found the level of difficulty to be pretty satisfying. I mean, I played it on whatever the most medium difficulty mode was, and I found that for most of the game anyway, it was quite... Sometimes you'd run into these sort of what seemed to be brick walls where it felt like I'd never be able to beat it, but then actually every single time that I tried to get past that brick wall. I got a bit further, and then I'd never be stuck at these places for as long as it sort of felt like I was going to be when I first encountered it. Which I'm, to do the most cliched video game thing in the world, like to compare it to Dark Souls, like there is a bit Dark Souls boss adjacent where you just sort of get battered away effortlessly, and then in not too long you actually manage to make quite a lot of progress. Just thinking about what else I can say before we move on. I had a couple of... I played this on the Steam Deck, which I think was... It was like, it works, and it ran pretty okay, but obviously it's quite a recent game to be playing on the Steam Deck, and I did definitely have a few technical issues. I had a glitch with people's hair every so often, where their hair would just lose all color for a bit for some reason. I also had... It took me Googling the appropriate settings to make it work. So if you have a Steam Deck and you've tried it and it didn't look great, like, you can make it work on the Steam Deck if you want to. You just need to Google what settings make it work. And the game did crash for me maybe like 2 times, where the game just sort of stopped, like it just crashed, and I had to reset my Steam Deck. But out of 35-40 hour experience, I can't remember exactly how long. That's not too bad, given that I'm playing it on a Steam Deck. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe now's a good time to transition to the... the last thing I would say before we hit spoilers before the spoilers is I enjoy the sequences I enjoy that they take sort of the time out in the camp scenes, and you have
love those.
The conversations, and you can choose how much you engage with those, and I found a lot of those things like quite enjoyable, and I sort of watched those every time that I could, like a little show.
I loved them
I enjoyed
so much.
that a lot.
The only thing I found comically weird about it was whenever it would go, relationship level increased 4, and it's like, all right, okay.
I completely agree.
This is so like gamer brain.
You have this like quite sweet, emotional conversation.
Level 3.
Level 3.
Don't you see that in real life? I mean, I'm always God,
maybe I'm still stuck on level 1 with everyone.
Yeah, maybe I haven't increased my relationship level with anyone. That like,
I mean, Sofie, we met you like a year ago, and every couple of months it just comes up. The relationship level
increased.
Level 2. That's what happened. Didn't it happen to you?
I thought that it was so fun. You're right, that you'd have this really sincere, moving conversation. There'd be a moment of quiet, and you'd be like, "Oh, what a lovely moment," and then it'll be like, and it's like, okay, all right, this is so like gamer language for like, you're a little bit closer. Like, you could have just said they're a little bit closer or something.
Should we move on to spoilers? But I want to talk about that more, but in the spoilers bit, just in case.
That's the Hans Zimmer
spoiler alert.
Spoiler sound.
Wee woo, wee woo.
That's very good. Alex, in your review of the game in episode 14, you mentioned the romance stuff. So first of all, I just wanted to say that the funniest time is if you've like the most gamer brained of all of them is if you like eventually slept with one of the characters in the game, and then it told you the relationship level increased. Like that was the one that felt the most like, oh, that feels weird. But in your summary of it, Alex, you said that there was a character that you could have a sexual relationship with. And I'm under the impression that there are 2 characters. So I was wondering which one.
I wasn't sure if I think I romanced, I guess.
Who did you romance?
CL. Wait, Luna's the one with no shoes, right? The other one's CL, right?
Yeah.
The one who flies.
One for the ones with more refined tastes. Luna.
Wear shoes.
I went with CL, and I think I just spoke to her first and then went with it, and so that probably locked off me sleep.
I was
wondering
with Luna.
I didn't know if I wasn't sure if it was possible to sleep with Luna, because it didn't seem like
apparently it's
clearly missed anything out.
Like they're both in the same playthrough.
Oh really? I don't know why I did wrong to do
around and find out.
If only.
I'm so glad that you guys all did the same thing as me, because I feel like my theory is just CL being on the left. Like when I have those fire conversations,
go to CL first. I do it clockwise,
I read English. I go left to right. So I start with CL, have the romantic conversation, and then I'm not about to have another one with Lunier. That feels.
But you can.
It feels like I'm cheating on.
You want.
But you can.
Frankly,
I didn't.
I would have been a slut if I could have. But I missed the opportunity. I don't know how to do it with Luna. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I like CL as well personally, but I was, as I said in that thing, I was impressed with that, the way it handles it. With that, it's just very kind of casual and like they're both youngish. I guess they're in their 30s, single people, and although actually in a kind of anime move, actually like Verso is like hundreds of years old, isn't he? So I don't know what the
and CL is not actually single.
well,
she
believes she can
she's
the
widowed,
possibility
right?
that she might not be
She
single.
considers herself
It
single.
comes up later
yeah.
because there's the possibility of resurrecting everyone, but at that point she doesn't know that. But I think just like that's that's the way romances work in reality. Unlike in most video games where it's like very gamified. I mean, it's a lot more of the relationship level 4 thing in most other games, right? Where it's like it's a series of like quests or something or romance things, and then the culmination is the sex, and this means they're a couple now, and you've won the romance quest line. Basically, that's how it is in most games. But the fact it's just a kind of a fairly casual thing that then, as I said, I had sex with her, and it turned out in the post Act 2 that like they might be able to bring her dead husband back. So yeah, we can't have sex again. Sorry. Although actually they do have sex one more time, which is a bit weird. They're like, well, we can have it one more time.
It's the last one.
One for the road.
But like, I found that quite refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, on that, I guess that fits into like, I feel like the gender politics of the game are like relatively progressive as far as the gaming industry goes.
Well,
like there are pretty complicated female characters that like there are probably more female characters that you care about than there are male characters that you care about, and they're probably the most generic characters in the game are maybe male. I would maybe say, I don't know. I guess I'm thinking not my L. I'm saying Verso. I think is possibly the most generic character in the game. I don't know if that's just me.
Verso, yeah.
Yeah, I think Verso and Gustav, arguably, they're both kind of.
But then, of course, because we're in the spoiler section, we know that Gustav is made to be killed. And Sofie, can I?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I think that all the female characters, I mean, all the characters in general are very well written, including the female characters. The game does. You are given Gustav as your protagonist character at the beginning, and then he dies, and he is immediately replaced with another dude to be in the party who is the new protagonist. And there is and again, this is like a JRPG thing, and also therefore also sort of an anime thing. There is something of a harem anime vibe to it, where you're the one guy in this party of hot babes, and they all kind of like you, and I mean, it's a lot more sophisticated than it, but there is like the residue of that in there. I thouut. But anyway, you're going to say it.
Not including my L there, of course.
You can put them all in swimsuits, and you can put her, the 15-year-old girl. I think she's 16 actually. 16-year-old girl. You can put her in a swimsuit too, and I'm just saying there's enough there for fan fiction. So I'm just saying there is that element of it that I think there is a kind
of the weed.
I feel like there's a kind of assumed agenda of the player there of, you're probably a dude, right? And you probably would like to be in a party with a bunch of pretty girls. And I'd say they take that and then they do a lot of really great stuff with it. It's very sophisticated on top of that. But I do think there is a base underlying kind of not super progressive sexual politics. But not to the point where I think anyone should be ashamed of having made it that way. But just like, I do think there is just like a slightly old-fashioned basic assumption.
I don't know, I didn't see it that way at all.
Yeah.
But
I didn't. The only time when I kind of agree with what you're saying, Alex, was the point when you move from Gustav to Verso, because Gustav died, and I was like, oh, okay, so we're going to be playing as my L from here on in. And then it was Verso, and I was like,
who's this dude? Yeah.
That's a bit weird. Yeah, so that's to the extent to which I kind of agree that it felt a bit strange.
You need a man to play with.
You just have a sort of replacement.
I do think it's mainly an artifact of the inspiration from old JRPGs. But shall we get on to the actual? Why don't I just do a quick kind of recap of what the big twists of the game are, and we could talk about that. So obviously, at the beginning of the game, the situation is that you've got this countdown that the paintress is painting every year. It comes down 1 year, and everyone at that age is gommaged into death. And these expeditions are going out to kill them. Your expedition arrives on the landmass, whatever, on the beach. they're met by an older guy who immediately kills shitloads of them, leaving only the party members that you end up with. As you go along, you progress further into it, and shockingly, Gustave at the end of the first act is killed by the old guy, who turns out to be a guy called Renoir. I would say, incidentally, if you go on video, there are some videos on the internet about like all the incredible foreshadowing in this game. My favorite bit of foreshadowing was when I was playing with Gustave in my party, and he got attacked in a battle. And for some reason, Maël just said, "Gustave, don't die." And I thought, what an odd thing to say. And then CL starts saying, "Gustave, don't die." And I was like, that's weird. And then 20 minutes later, guess who died? Yeah, I just thought it was such a weird thing to like put in there, and then it turns out to be foreshadowing. Anyway, so Gustave dies, and this weird guy comes out of nowhere called Verso, and he joins the party. And as it goes on, it becomes clear that there's this family made up of Renoir, the father, Verso, the son, a weird girl called Alicia, and there's also a sister in there. Pardon?
The Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Sorry, Father, Son, and
the mother as well.
Sorry, keep going.
And there's stuff going on with them. Eventually, you finally get to, you have to fight Renoir a few times. Eventually, you finally get to the paintress, and you kill her, and you've done it. You've beaten what is the stated goal of the game. You get back to, what was it, Lumiere, the main city, and everyone gamages out except Maël. This is when the big twist of the game happens. The reveal is that the reason that the world looks like fucked up Paris is because in the real Paris, the quote-unquote real Paris, there are a bunch of people living, and they are called the Painters, and they have the ability to paint pictures that are living pictures that they can then go inside of and live inside of and experience and do cool things in there. And they are at war with another group of people who you never see called the Writers. And this resulted in this family getting attacked by them, and the son, Verso, dying in a fire. And the reveal is that Maël is actually the daughter of this family, who was also burned in the fire. And Verso, the younger Verso, had painted this painting, which is everything we've seen in the game is, and he obviously painted bits of Paris in there, which is why it looks like fucked up Paris. And then in grief from Verso dying, the mother went in there and created, I think, all the normal people, all the various weirdo fantastical people were creations of the young Verso, but all the people that we've seen were the creations of the mother. Then Renoir went in to try and get the mother back, and he used his painting powers within there to start the gamage and try to kill everyone. And what we've actually seen is the paintress, everyone thought the paintress was doing it. The paintress is actually doing what she can to stop the gamage, and the big number is just a warning that this is the next bit of the gamage she couldn't stop. And then Maël actually Alicia went in the painting as well after them, but something happened and she ended up getting born as a child and living there for a whole 16 years because time works differently in the painting. And so Maël and Alicia are in fact the same person. So let's just go. That's the big twist of the game. What do you think of the twist?
I guess the only thing I would add to that, just if on the off chance someone's listening to this and hasn't played the game, is that from Renoir's perspective, he's not like killing everyone. From Renoir's perspective, he's just erasing a painting that's happened. Like that's the sort of, because at the end, you've got to make a decision basically about when.
Yes, we'll get onto that in a sec. But why don't we talk about that big twist first? What you thought about it? That's all a painting, yeah.
All a painting. Well, so up to the point where you fight the paintress, I basically had really enjoyed the story in the game. I thought it was very atmospheric. Sofie mentioned it not being about climate change earlier, but I think you put it actually really well in episode 14, Alex, which is when you said that it like taps into like the bleakness that climate change creates.
Yeah, no, which I would agree with that.
And especially with the questions around like should you have kids or not, like all that kind of stuff is like, and it's worth saying that a lot of the story of this game was come up with during COVID. Like, so during that period, people were sort of dying sporadically and you don't know where it's going to end, and it's a very scary period. And that definitely you can feel that echo in the game itself. But so I really liked that, but I do I don't know that I like the shift from that to it being like a sort of family drama. I feel like maybe me and Sophie are going to disagree on this one, because you said that you quite liked the interpersonal side of it. But for me, I thought it was like an interesting, intriguing exploration of living in a very depressing world where like death's all around you, and like you feel powerless, and people like so many people have gone and tried to make the big difference required to make the world better, and they've just died, and you don't even hear from them again. And then then the next lot of people go, and they get the journals and stuff, but it's basically like so bleak that it felt like it resonated, therefore, in like a world which does feel quite bleak right now in 2025, 2026, now that the year after it's come out. So then the shift of it being fundamentally about the family drama, for me that felt like a no-no. I think the no-no began for me actually before that was even revealed. It was the point when I was all in on the game. I really liked the story up until the moment when everyone had got gommaged apart from Mael. And at that point, well, let me actually go back even more further. It's a pet peeve of mine when a game pretends it's going to end and then it doesn't end and there's actually ages left. Because maybe this is just me, I quite like knowing approximately how long I'm going to be playing a game for. And like, you don't get this in other mediums very often. Like if there's a TV show, like you'll know how many episodes there are going to be. If there's a film, you'll know the runtime of the film. If there's a book, you'll see how big the book is because you're holding a book. But games can do this thing where they're like, here's the end, pranked, you got to do another 10 hours. So like there's a satisfaction, there's a release you get, a pleasure you get from finishing a game that it denied me, and I felt frustrated.
Before we move on, I just want to say that is very much a trope from JRPGs that they're building on. I know you were playing through all the Final Fantasies at one point, but I think you only got to like 2 or something.
Well, I've played 2 Final Fantasy games, so far.
Yeah. When you get to the later Final Fantasies, that's a thing they do very often, which is like, I think even actually, I've not played Final Fantasy 1, but I believe that like the beginning of the game is you save the princess and then something else happens in Final Fantasy 1. But like, it's a big JRPG trope that like, okay, looks like we're coming up to the final, this is the final boss, and then something happens and actually there's a big change and the world's completely different now, and actually there's like a lot more game. That's a very, very common JRPG trope.
Yeah, and I'm not arguing that is always is like inherently bad. I'm just saying that I personally find that quite frustrating, and that might be a personal failing of mine. I think it's also because the way I like to try and address this is I look at how long to beat to get an idea of about how far through the game I should be. But that means if I, for example, have spent ages doing all the dialogue with everyone, that I'm approaching the how long to beat average, like straight through finish line time at about the time the game's doing its fake ending.
I agree that can be annoying sometimes. I mean, it kind of depends how the game handles it. In this case, I was 100% sure that killing the paintress would not be the end of the game. I was just like, this is obviously going, I mean, as I said for Silksong, that game has 3, there's like Act 1, then Act 2. And I mean, if there's 2 acts, there has to be a 3rd act. You can't make a 2-act game.
Yes, but in Silksong, Act 2 is is an end of Silksong. You get the credits, the game's over, and Act 3 is endgame content that you can do or you can not do. Whereas in Clair Obscur, it's like, no, Act 2's finished, but that's not the end of the game at all. There's loads of endgame content, and you can do the endgame content, but you've got to do but if you want, but like that comes before the like final boss. So I don't know about you, I didn't really do much of the Act 3 like endgame content. I just sort of went and did the final boss.
Sure.
But let me roll back a bit. So we had everyone gommage, and Mael was still alive, and I was additionally not happy at that stage before we even had the proper reveal of what was going on, because I felt like it was doing a trope, which was like, oh, if they hadn't done anything, like things would be better because then everyone wouldn't be dead. And then therefore the game was basically saying like, well, if you haven't got complete information, how can you ever make any like big political or moral decision? And so then it felt to me at that stage like the game was basically presenting an argument for not doing anything ever. Like, don't try and do anything politically or changing anything because, there might be negative unintended consequences that you've not foreseen. And I can't decide whether I still think the game was kind of doing that in Acts 1 and 2, like, because that still was the effects of all the things that they tried to do, which were good things that they were trying to do when they're trying to kill the paintress. Like that was good. They should have tried to kill the paintress from the perspective that they had in the game, and it still felt like they were very much punished for that. So I still do feel like the game is kind of making an argument for not doing anything socially or politically ever, because what if accidentally in doing that you kill everyone you've ever known? Like, okay, yeah, I mean, I guess it's a possibility, but I'm not sure that it's that interesting of a possibility to explore. It just felt like a shock for the sake of having a shock, and I didn't know that I thought it had like negative. I don't think it really worked for me.
Sophie, what do you think of the? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And then when you pull back, no, actually, yeah, because let's. I've talked for quite a long time about this bit.
I guess I was
Sophie,
going to say about that twist.
What are your takes on this bit?
I do actually agree with you in terms of like I think the process I had was that like I was like, I'm playing a game which has these sort of like worldly consequences and stakes and stuff. I could also tell very early on that the paintress wasn't going to be. I kind of had predicted quite early that it was the number of people that could be saved rather than the number of people that could live. Quite early on, I kind of figured that was the case, where I was like, well, I know it's not going to end with the paintress, so I'm sure it must be something like that is going to happen, right? Is going to transpire. So I kind of saw it coming. And I guess I don't necessarily, I think I probably, if I had to choose between playing a game that was about like the extremely sort of fantastical world of the painters and stuff, which like very much feels like an idea that I would have come up with as like a very creative like 13-year-old, where it's just like this massive sort of so many layering of just like creative alternative universes, which again which I say come up with as a 13-year-old, not to disparage it, but to say like it's just so creative as to be a little bit excessive almost. I think if I had a choice between playing like that game and the game of like defeating the paintress and the Gummage, I think I would have preferred the game where it's like saving the world from the Gummage and the paintress. I think I would have preferred that. But I think my process was definitely like, I was playing this game, which was about defeating the paintress and saving the world. And then I was like, oh, I guess I'm playing a different game halfway through. And I guess I was okay with that. I guess I was like, okay, well, the goalposts have shifted. And I think I'm okay with that shift because I am interested in like for me, the sort of climate background. What I really wanted to say is that it's definitely about climate grief specifically. Like not just climate anxiety or just like being a bit sad about climate. I think it's about climate grief, of this idea of like, you know, we're never going to have seasons the way that we did when we were kids ever again. We're not going to be able to confidently have kids without considering whether or not the world they grow up in is going to be worth living in. And the grief of that idea, you know, of that grief of that lack of autonomy. So I definitely think it's more about climate grief than anything. And obviously that just ties into the overall theme of grief, what the sort of family is all the interpersonal family drama is just about grief, and obviously how they're sort of interacting with each other based on that. So I think I was definitely kind of like a little bit disappointed, but I was also like, okay, I guess this is just the game that I'm playing now. And I was all right with that. I think the only issue I really had was that it kind of felt a little bit like it was all a dream. In terms of like, okay, but if none of these characters are real, if none of these things are really happening, then like, why should I care about them? If the only people that are really real in this context is like Verso and Mael and like, you know, Pierce Brosnan, Jean Renoir and the mother, then it's like, well, why should I don't know. It made it a bit difficult for me to like then care about the characters, which seem to just be sort of fictions of or figures of someone's imagination. So I felt a bit disappointed in that way, in terms of like it felt like a bit like, oh, it was all a dream the whole time.
I feel like the discussion of who counts as real is we're gonna get into that in a bit. But like, personally, I quite liked the twist at the time. I was like oh, it's all, you know, there's this upper world that's like the quote unquote real world. I thought that was really interesting. Because I was like, why is there all this Paris shit in when it seems to be a completely fantastical realm? So I thought that was fun. And, I'm not against the concept of the family being involved and all that. You know, the wider themes of like grief and so on linking into what's going on with this family. I'm not against that per se. But my concern was that as it went along, it just became more and more about them. And the concerns of the wider world just started to drop away, I felt. I suppose we can get it.
That's the thing. I think for me, I was just like,
Sure.
I guess it's not a game about the wider world. It's a game about this family, is like my kind of conclusion that I reached.
Well, why don't we get into the end? Because that gets straight into that. So after this twist, Maëlle uses her painter powers to bring back just her friends. I think it's just Lune and Ciel at this point, isn't it? Oh, and does Verso count? I'm not sure. Anyway, and they weren't Gamage.
And Monoko.
It brings it back, and basically the plan is now that you're going to go back to Lumiere, which is where the real Renoir, the Renoir you've seen before, is just a painted copy of Renoir. This is the real Renoir, and to go defeat him. Now, before you do that, there are a bunch of extra missions you can do. This is basically the end game. There's shitloads of like optional super bosses in this game. There are also, each of the characters has their own little kind of character quest, which if you're playing a game, I recommend you do. I know you didn't really have time, Sofie. I don't know, Ed, did you do all the character quests?
No, I didn't, but I've heard everyone say that they're really good.
I do, especially...
Yeah, I'd like to go back to them. But they were also really difficult.
I especially recommend you do Maëlle's one, because that one is like a proper actual, that's like a whole level of the game. But... So, yeah, you can do those things. They're optional, but then you go and you go back into Lumiere. You brought back all the souls or something of all the previous expeditioners or something. Exactly what you brought back their chroma. Exactly what chroma does is not super clear, but it's in some way you brought them back to fight with you. Eventually, you make your way after fighting a bunch of battles to Renoir. You fight him, you beat him, and he just kind of gives up at that point. But we then get the very end where there's a kind of a philosophical argument between Verso, who's in fact a copy of Verso, because the original Verso died in a fire, and Maëlle, aka Alicia. Verso wants to destroy the painting. So I should say, Renoir's whole motivation for everything was to get his wife and his family out of the painting, and he has pledged to destroy it once they're out of the painting, because he feels it had been very bad. Verso also now wants to destroy the painting, because to create this painting, a part of the real Verso's soul had to be used and is in it. And in some way, that soul is suffering. I'm not entirely clear how, but it is suffering apparently. And also the implication is it's very bad for Maëlle's mental health, basically, that she be in the painting, because in the real world, she's heavily scarred from the fire and she can't speak. But in the fantasy world of the painting, she can be a normal person and have all these friends and so on. Maëlle wants to keep the painting going and bring everyone back who got gamaged, and that's basically what she wants to do. You can choose which one of these endings you go with. In the Maëlle ending, we see that she's brought everyone back, but it kind of seems spooky and weird how everything's gone. But she and Verso is up there made to play on a piano, even though he absolutely didn't want to do this. And then at the final shot, we see Maëlle has paint all over her eyes, which is the symbol for being in the painting. So the suggestion is that she's still in the painting, and this is like eating away. She's slowly wasting away inside this painting. And on the other side, Verso wins and kicks Maëlle out of the painting. Renoir, in the real world, burns the painting, and Maëlle sees a little vision of all her friends that fades away, and she's sad about it. But the implication is that probably this is better for her mentally, because she's not like living in a fantasy. That is the ending of the game. So which one of you wants to talk about that?
I'll go. No? Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
Yeah, you go first, Soph, and then which ending did you do, Sophie?
Yeah, so I chose Maëlle's. And the argument for that, I kind of, wasn't really sure. I do think it is a powerful choice in that I don't think there is an entirely correct answer, I suppose. But I feel like, I do kind of feel like there's a correct answer now, but I understand why I made the choice that I did, and I understand why people would make any of the choices that they did. Where I initially chose Maëlle, my reasoning for that was basically that the entire game has been her sort of battling with people who are trying to make decisions for her, in terms of like she's been battling Renoir and she's been battling her mother, and now she's battling Verso. Like she just keeps having to battle people in order to like secure her own autonomy. Everyone else seems to have the last say or want to have the last say about what's best for her, and it just seemed unfair to me. That being said, I played it and then I watched the alternative ending and I was like, yeah, Verso's the right choice. I 100% feel like choosing Verso's side is the right choice because it's like you are, it's the choice of like, I suppose, living in this in this world where everything is okay versus letting go of what is not okay and sort of moving on and recovering from grief if the whole game is actually about grief. Then I do think that like the Verso option seems like the more merciful I think it's the more merciful for everyone as well. Because I took into account Mael's autonomy, but I didn't take into account Verso's autonomy, where he was also stuck in the painting against his will and just like suffering in the way that he was. So, she's getting to preserve her autonomy by keeping the painting, but at the cost of her brother, who, she's only keeping around, well, not only keeping around, but like very much keeping around for her own sake, which is like, not super criticizably so, but is a little bit selfish, I suppose. So yeah, that's what I chose, and that's how I felt about it. I ended up feeling like I made the wrong choice.
Alex, you chose Renoir, didn't you? Because you said that in the. You chose Renoir, didn't you, Alex? Because you said that in the first in the previous episode we talked about this.
Renoir isn't one of the choices. Well, I will say that I do think that Verso is like the canon choice. It definitely seems like the one that makes more narrative sense, and I think they spent a bit more money on the FMV at the end as well. So I think that's probably what they're going for, and also that means because they're obviously going to make Clair Obscur, a new Clair Obscur game, probably about what was going on with the writers. What's their deal? I imagine. And if you choose Verso's one, that gives the theoretical possibility that Mael could be in it. And everyone loves Mael. So that's what I think will probably be the quote-unquote canon ending. But I chose Mael's ending of it originally. But then I went back and I watched the second one. And I just think Verso's one is obviously what is kind of intended as the quote-unquote true ending. But what did you think of it, Ed?
I chose Mael's ending. And I would stick with Mael's ending. I think the one thing that your answers to the question are failing to consider is whether or not the other people that live in the painting are conscious, sentient beings who shouldn't be genocided, which is it's how obviously it's
that was. I mean, I was avoiding saying that because I didn't want to preempt anything.
I think, that's why I chose it as well, right? That's also why I chose it, but which is like, I guess like at the same time, it's like in the Verso sort of version of things, everyone just seemed to sort of like be cognizant of why this had to happen. They all like, most of them was peaceful goodbyes, except for Lene, who like sat there and just sort of stares daggers at you, and you're like, sorry, this feels bad. But like all the characters do seem to sort of fade away. Like, yeah, I suppose, it's time to go now. I appreciate that this was going to happen at some point. It seems to be the sort of reticent acceptance. But you're right. It's like you are also deciding everyone else's fate. You're deciding every single person's fate. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with kind of what you both said on what you said, Sofie, about the game's clearly about grief. Like that's the main theme of the game, clearly. And early on, it seems like it's about climate grief or like that kind of existential, like big societal level grief where everyone at once feels a certain sort of thing. Again, ringing true with the COVID element of it. And that's partially, and I think that's a really interesting and like not unique, but like relatively unusual thing for a game to explore. And I really liked it. And that's why I felt quite disappointed when it was like, well, instead of being about climate grief, we're just going to be about grief in general. Like, obviously, there's a thematic resonance between the two, but I just think grief is like an interest. Obviously, of course, it's a very interesting artistic thing to explore, but that the game was sort of promising to be about something that I was specifically very interested in, and then it ended up being a bit more like something that I've
very fair.
Obviously seen a lot of and read and played a lot of things about grief. So I was like, okay, cool. I mean, yeah, sure, grief, but like climate grief, that's more specific. So then I agree that the Verso Renoir's sort of goal, if that happens, like that is the more thematically resonant ending for a game about grief. But I think the way they've set it up, I mean, there's nothing in the game to me that suggests at any stage that the people that we meet and spend all of our game with until right at the end are anything other than sentient beings. Like CL, Gustave, Lunier, all of those people, Monoko, all of those people seem to be people. They seem to have inner lives. They seem to be just as real as the quote-unquote real people who exist outside of them. And so for me, the question was just quite simply, do you want to do a mass murder because we think it might help this one person get over a death in the family and their fact that they've been injured as a result of it, or not? So for me, I was like, well, this isn't a complicated question.
That is exactly.
And
I mean,
it's
as I said
interesting
in episode 14, whatever it was, I really love this game. It probably would have been my game of the year until the ending, and then I still think it's a very good game, but that ending just knocked it off being a great game for me. And when I watched Sofie finish it, I got angry about it all over again. I was just like, this is even worse than I remembered. You know, I find it like borderline offensive how little this game cares about the masses, you know? As a game, like once you get to that twist and then it goes on and on, it becomes more and more just about this one family. And even within that family, mainly just about Maëlle, one girl. And the fate of the world. And I noticed again when I watched it on your stream, Sofie, that it literally says, decide the fate of the world or the fate of the painting. And it says choose Verso or choose Maëlle. And it's just like the conversation they had almost nothing to do with the fate of the painting. It was just about what's best for the two of them personally. And the actual people would be affected by this, like, you know, Lune and CL, they're all outside because this all takes place in a weird metaphysical void. They don't get to get to comment on this, and we can probably assume they'd say, "Please don't kill us all." That they're not even given the chance to voice that quite obvious wish. And as I said, as I agree with you 100%, Ed, that this game could not have gone further to prove that everyone in the painting is definitely a totally real person with real hopes and dreams and wishes and whatever. So the fact that the game cares so little, I mean, one of the, as I said, I chose Maëlle because I was like, well, that's the one that doesn't kill everyone. But then you get the Maëlle ending and it's like, oh, maybe should you have done this? And the answer is yes, everyone's alive. I'm sorry about the mental health of a single teenager. You know, I care a lot less about that than the lives of thousands of people. And it just like, it really just disregarded that element entirely. And as I said, I found it borderline offensive to the level that it did that. And I got angry about it all over again just the other day. So yeah, it really let me down, that ending. Just how little it cared about all the, you know, like fucking Gustav died and it made such a big deal about that. And then it's just at the end, like, yeah, it doesn't matter, don't worry about it. I don't know. That's how it seems to me anyway. I know, look, a lot of people love this game and the ending of this game. I've heard a lot of people talk about it. I think they're all wrong. But I know I'm probably in the minority. And maybe not on this podcast, but in the world.
I think my only disagreement with your take is I'm less certain that that's what that the game is saying. Don't care about the people in the world, don't care about the masses or whatever. I think in choosing Verso's ending, that's the side that you've picked. If you do that, then you are not caring about the masses. But I didn't personally feel like the game was sort of telling me that I'd made the wrong choice by choosing Maëlle. And now that, as I've just said, like as just with the grief and stuff, I can see that there's a more like it resolves that thematic element in a more satisfying way if you choose Verso. But things are like a little slightly strange in Maëlle's ending. But like basically, I thought it was going more like, you've chosen a legitimate ending, but you know everything's not perfect. And that's how I've interpreted the ending, rather than them going, "Oh dear, what have you done?" Like I didn't come away from it thinking they wanted me definitely to pick Verso. I came away from it, and maybe this is because I was so personally, I had no doubt who was with the correct ending from my perspective. It was clearly Maëlle, and I felt the game. Like the reason why I think that is because of all the things that have happened in the game. So like I didn't feel like the game was condemning me for picking Maëlle's choice, and so I don't condemn the game in turn for basically, from what as you seem to be, for making it seem like Verso's choice is the only choice that could be legitimate.
I mean,
no,
I think they'd say both. So if you ask them, the developers, they'd say both are legitimate. But I mean, I think it's definitely. I mean, they're both bad endings. They're both bittersweet at minimum, right? And you know, I think there's a clear air of like sinisterness over Maëlle's ending. Like, there's a question of like, how much is like this all? Are they all now just the puppets of Maëlle dancing to her tune? Is this a good world to live in? I think it's definitely implying that. You know, I'm not. I don't have a problem with it being a bad ending per se, but just the fact that it felt like even in that ending where everyone is saved, what's going on with them is it's just like, oh yeah, bad. Don't worry about it. You know, we don't hear from them. they're an afterthought. What's important in that ending is Mael, what's going on with her, and Verso, what's going on with him. Oh man, how are they feeling about this situation? So the entire game just like forgets the entire population. It just built up. Anyway, that's my big issue with it. I will say, just say I do have one other issue, which is that this is like more nitpicky, but if you're going to have like a brutal choice ending, like there's no right answers, someone's going to be sad either way. It's heart-wrenching. There needs to be, you can't need to think of about 50 different other things they could do. Like the entire ending basically relies on the fact that like, oh, well, if they leave the painting, if Mael leaves the painting, Renoir definitely will burn it. He cannot possibly be stopped. I mean, in the real world, other than his abilities to paint paintings and enter them, he's just a guy as far as we know. So the potential genocide of an entire people rests on their definite inability to save the painting in any way if Mael leaves. That cannot be even debated. And I'm just like, I could think of about 50 ways that like, oh, maybe surely Renoir can be reasoned with on some level to not kill thousands of people. Like, couldn't they like take the painting and like put it in a sealed box and bury it in a forest somewhere? Like, there's so many other things they could possibly do other than these two drastic choices, and they don't even consider or address them. I just find that pretty weak, personally. But yeah, anyway, those are my big issues with the ending of this game.
I think they did address those, but whether or not you think they addressed them in a satisfying way is fair. It is up to you. But they did suggest, oh, what if we hid the painting and stuff like that?
And he's just like, no, he'll find it. He'll just find it. He'll just find it. There's no doubt he'll definitely 100% find it. No one can deny it. He'll definitely find it, definitely for sure. And that's like, what? Like, can't they come up with a plan to hide it well or something? I don't know. It really annoyed me.
I mean, I think even because I even think that, like, I guess I could think of other ways that they could do it. But the main issue that Renoir wants to destroy the painting, as far as I understand it, is because he believes that it's essentially prolonging both of his children's suffering.
Yeah.
So he doesn't care about the people in the painting because he doesn't really see them as people because he's not in he's in the painting, but only for the express reason of like protecting his children. So I think like, this is the choice that's presented to us because this is the choice that's presented to Mael and Verso in terms of like, this is what Renoir will allow.
Sure. But I mean,
Verso can't leave the painting and hide it because he's not real.
I'm okay with having the choice. I'm just saying, like, since so much is on the line, the lives of all these people, like, maybe there should be some discussion about it. And there is the barest of discussion, like, oh, well, basically just enough to just justify that there's only two choices. And, like someone would have said, surely, oh, maybe, are we really sure he'll definitely burn it down? As long as they're not in the painting. I mean, I get why he wanted to destroy the painting. I get that as a basic concept. But, I think really the real problem with the game is that it bases its ending on the question, really fundamentally on the question of, do all the people in the painting count as people? And then they never interrogate that properly at any point. No one really discusses, do they actually count as people? Not even Renoir. We're just kind of assuming that's his position because he's so fine with burning the painting, right? They don't properly. It feels like that would be a clear element of it. Like, do these people count as people? And they just maybe that was cut from the game.
I feel like they do kind of address that because, I think that's what the game's about. I think that's what your experiences are about. I think you're absolutely supposed to see all the characters as people, as like proper and true people. And I think the thing is like when it comes to Verso, it's not that he doesn't see them as people, but I think he himself doesn't see himself as a person.
Sure.
Because he only exists in the painting and he's just desperate to end his like permanent, immortality, which like obviously immortality is also like quite a common theme that's explored in things in terms of he's suffered so much having to have, experience death after death after death. And he's just in a permanent stage of grief because he keeps losing people he cares about. And he's in the perspective of seeing Mael, who's like, yes, you're in this stage of grief that you can exist in permanently. Absolutely. But I know what that's like and it fucking sucks. The alternative is to die once and then you don't have to experience the grief of any of your loved ones ever again. So I feel like they do kind of address that the people are people.
I mean, I agree. As I said, I'm not saying this is like
But she wouldn't because she sees him as a person.
I mean, Mael could have just painted out Verso. She could have just done that. So like his situation could have been easily resolved, basically. But like I'm saying that the characters don't really
can I give the
properly
one
debate
take
it,
as to
my point.
why?
And that's ultimately what the choice of the game. Sorry, Ed, you can say.
I agree the characters don't specifically debate it, and I do think that the game still sort of engages with it to some extent, but that a flaw of the game is that it overly, to a much too great of an extent, engages it only in terms of how does it affect the two people at the end who have become the leads. But I think the only other point that I want to bring up about it is the like obvious meta point that they're making. And I think that's the only argument for the people in the game not being real that's present in any way in the art, as far as I can tell. So to make that point clearer, what I mean is, obviously, they're in a fictional world and in playing with those, enjoying, like, living with those people there, and then they come out to the quote-unquote real world. However, you and me and everyone playing the game, we live in presumably the actual real world, right? And they live in a fictional world within our real world. So our relationship to the characters, like Renoir in the real world of the game, is analogous to Renoir's relationship with the people in his fictional world. And now, obviously, from our perspective, it's not an ethical question at all whether you should, for example, uninstall the game after you finish playing it. But the sort of analogy then is that maybe Renoir's right, because, it's just a fictional world. They're not real people. You can just turn them off in the same way that you, as the player, don't think twice about uninstalling the game, etc. I think that's to me, that was the only thing that the game was sort of trying to communicate, to make you question whether or not, it was okay to kill everyone. But really, there was a clear difference, which is we know definitively that Renoir in the game is not a real conscious being with any kind of sentience by themselves, that he's a line of code. Whereas the paintings do appear to be real, genuine, sentient people. So it's more like, what if we made a computer game that developed sentience? Then would it be okay to uninstall it? And to me, the answer to that question is no, it wouldn't be okay to uninstall it. It's not okay to unconsensually end the sentience of things. Really? That's the position that I think is not that bold of a take, unless, apart from, there are obviously circumstances where maybe you have to for greater good, blah, 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 but that's not really, that's what's at stake here. So I would say that that's the only thing that would make me think even a little bit about the Mael ending, and even that I basically just sort of disregarded. So I feel like we've made our positions clear at the end here. Sofie, I want to say, because you started this bit about the ending by saying that ultimately you thought Renoir's ending was the right ending. But I feel like in a lot of the discussion, it feels like you've more sided with the idea that maybe Mael's was the right ending. So not to put you on the spot, but like at the end, how are we feeling?
No, that's fair. Because initially I did choose Mael's ending, right? That was kind of my instinct. But I do think that it definitely, as we've discussed, the cinematic felt like it was saying, did you make the right choice? And I think I just felt a little bit guiltier. But then, obviously, I think the same sort of moment in Verso's cinematic occurs when Lene is extremely upset with you. Like, you could tell she just makes this obviously like death stare at you, and it's like, yeah, because you fucking murdered her. And I think both endings very clearly have this like element of sinister, did you make the right choice, designed to make you, question yourself and choose the other one. So I think, I guess I think I am leaning a little bit more towards like, oh, well, maybe I should have just trusted my instinct. Maybe, because I felt really bad initially that I saw Verso's ending, and I was like, oh, this seems a lot more peaceful. But I think hearing your justification, I'm like, oh, maybe I did sort of trust that instinct for a reason, of like Mael for a reason. And I think, I guess I do think that, like, obviously we've said this about, killing everyone in the painting. I do think at the end of the day, I do think what I saw as well, that Verso's ending was clearly the more sort of like co-signed ending by the game. But now I'm not, I don't know. I don't know if I'm entirely sure about that. Maybe it is. I think they both have their elements of sort of their moments of cynicism about that particular ending choice, which I do think ultimately, if we've discussed it this much, and I've been back and forth on it so much, I think ultimately it means it's a powerful choice. I think it's a good choice to have to make in terms of, like, we've complained before about video games that offer you choices that just don't mean anything, where it's like, do you want to save city A or city B? There's no difference between the two. And it's like, oh, well, that, But I think here I could genuinely enter a discussion with anyone who thoroughly believed that Verso was the right choice or thoroughly believed Mael was the right choice. I'm like, I see where you're coming from both of them. I think at the end of the day for me, I'm like, oh yeah, it's a good, powerful choice. That's a thoughtful choice to have to make as my sort of conclusion. So yeah, I think I do prefer Mael's ending in the end, but because there's no genocide.
So have we all come to the same position then, which is that Mael's ending is the morally correct ending, but the game seems to want you to maybe choose Verso? Because I wonder if I'm just thinking out loud here as well. I wonder if the game felt like it needed to overcompensate. Like Mael's ending does involve killing everyone you've ever known in the entire game. So I wonder if they like pushed a bit heavily on putting Verso's ending, like framing that in a satisfying way, because otherwise it basically is what is it, the Fallout 3 choice of do you want to kill lots of people for nearly no reason or not? If they don't try and justify it in some sense,
think that's true. I think that,
does end up being that.
As I was playing that game towards the end, I was like, okay, they seem to be leaning on the idea that being in the painting is like unhealthily living in a fantasy world. And I'm like, how's that going to work then? If the suggestion would be that then she should leave it. And I was just like, what are they going to do? And then what they did was very disappointing for me. But I do think they were kind of seeding that position earlier on. It didn't come out of nowhere.
True. I don't necessarily mean in terms of the final product, but I mean in terms of the writing process. At some point, they go,
I feel like the story was
and there's a clear correct ending.
These thematic concepts in line. Not that they came up with the ending and then they reverse engineered a way to make it justifiable.
Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. I mean, also we should say if they're pushing towards the Verso's ending being correct, then with the sort of meta understanding of what's going on in the game, and they're basically telling you to stop playing that game.
Put
Go
down your
outside.
damn phone,
It's sort of
kids.
the thematic conclusion of the game.
Cut
Go
some
bury your
grass.
goddamn brother.
Yeah, exactly. Which is quite funny. I don't think I've got much. I don't think I've got much more to say about.
I think we should probably move
I think
on.
we should probably try and
wrap
it up.
And then last thoughts, final thoughts.
But I think the only I feel like it would be a crime for us to talk about Clobbers without mentioning like how
Incredible.
weird it is that this game happened, and the fact that virtually like half the people in senior positions in this game didn't work in games or work in their field at all beforehand. I mean, it's crazy to be blunt. Like, it's remarkable. It's a strange sequence of events. I mean, everyone's heard the story that they found. Who was it? They found the writer on Reddit or something like that. They put a Reddit post out asking for a voice actor, and the person who was the lead writer was like, yeah, I'll give that a go. And then she started giving them feedback on the dialogue, and then they started having more in-depth story conversations, and then by the end, this person they found on Reddit ends up being the lead writer of the show. Of the game, sorry. And the same with, like,
I think it's so
the art
inspiring.
director. They were just
It's
looking
so
on
scrappy.
random
I love
forums
it.
of art forums, indie game art forums, stuff like that. And that's how they found the art director. They found some art that they liked, and then they emailed them, and then they got involved. They'd never worked in games before. And same with the music as well.
The music
because we talked about the music so much. Same with the music. They just found that guy on a forum.
Phenomenal.
He'd never made anything professionally before. The writer had never published. Like, it's great. It's such a great story, and I'm so glad the game ended up being as good as it was, because I did ultimately really like the game. And I think it's partially my playing of it. I think if I'd played it when it first came out and I wasn't like already aware that this was meant to be Game of the Year and all that stuff, I think I would have like had my mind blown by this like really small upstart like making this incredible game. I think partially coming into it expecting this to be like the best game I've ever played is what makes me like more critical of an ending that I think could be better, and I don't really like what they did with the plot twist later on. But you know, that's when I'm judging it on the scale of is this the greatest game of all time or not? And the answer is not.
Well,
but
I mean,
it is very good.
Yeah.
That's my take.
I played it when it came out, and I came to pretty similar conclusions to you. But you know, I'd say while I slagged off the ending, and I did find the ending very disappointing. Overall, I still think it's a really good game. I really enjoyed it. Everything pretty much up to the ending, I thought was fantastic. Very excited to see Clair Obscur 2, the inevitable Clair Obscur 2.
And the movie.
So, and the movie, maybe. Maybe that'll be as good as the Final Fantasy movie. Maybe, who knows?
They've already sold the rights to the movie.
So I think, is there any other final thoughts? All right. Well, we can move on. And that means that's the end of the episode, everyone. Yeah, that's right. There's no news bit because we did the news bit last week. So why don't we just get on straight to the goodbyes? As always, We'll be back next week. Yes, next week, more news. That's the way it's going. It's weekly, baby. You're never going to be rid of us. I told you we're doing this forever until the end of time. You can find us on Twitter at Red Barrels Pod, on Blue Sky at redbarrelspodcast.bsky.social. Personally, you can find me at Alex Dean, ALEXDUIN, on Twitter, and the same .bsky.social on Blue Sky. What about you, Sofie? How can people find you?
You can find me on Twitch. I stream 3 days a week, Monday, Thursday, and Friday. Twitch.tv/SoFreely, SOFREELY.
And you, come one, come all. You can find me on Blue Sky at Not a Lemon, and on X/Twitter/whatever at Still Not a Lemon.
Hooray!
See you there.
And of course, the music, as always, is from Brilliant Drink and is fantastic. And we desperately beg that you share us and tell your friends and
tell your husband,
just
tell
spread the
your
word
kids,
of Red Barrels. But for now, until literally just next week, yeah, exactly. Until literally just next week, we will be saying goodbye.
Bye.